What's going on? I'm that Scottish nerd, and if you love the Pokemon trading card game as much as I do, be sure to subscribe down below as I post videos multiple times a week bringing you deck profiles and battles. And in today's video, we're taking a break from the Players Cup stuff and looking at the expanded format once again, having a play around with my Togekiss vmax deck featuring Flapple, which is an awesome Pokemon which spreads damage around your opponent's board. There is timestamps down below, however, if you want to skip past the deck profile, as I do have an in-depth look at the card choices. Getting right into the deck profile here, we are going to be looking at the various Pokemon and trainer cards we have in the deck, but as you can see, we don't have a huge amount of Pokemon. The main focus is of course on the Togekiss vmax here. The max glide attack for just 2 colourless energy lets us deal 120 damage, and then we can search our deck for any 2 cards of our choosing. So this is great. It's not a huge amount of damage, but we are going to be supplementing that of course with the Flapple. The main draw to this card is the fact that we get to search our deck, as well as having free retreat and a huge amount of HP that we can have a lot of healing options with. So we'll take a look at the other cards here. As I mentioned, the Flapple is the main support Pokemon that we're going to be using here. It is a grass type stage 1 with the ability Apple Drop, and once during your turn you can put 20 damage on one of your opponent's Pokemon, and then you shuffle this Pokemon back into your deck. So it's very good for getting extra supplementary damage, which is going to really help our Togekiss vmax to get some knockouts in key points of the game, as well as targeting down things on the opponent's bench if they choose to retreat or switch out of the active spot. So we have a 4-4 count of the Flapple as well as the 3-3 vmax line. We're also playing one copy of the Tapu Lele GX just in case we get a dead hand in the early game. Then we want this to be able to go ahead and get ourselves a supporter card. And then of course we're playing the 2 copies of Execute with Propagation. This is a key card in almost every expanded deck, with the Propagation ability allowing you to put it back into your hand from the discard pile, and that means that you can easily get free discards with some of your trainer cards here. So speaking of those trainer cards, we'll have a look at some of the key ones here. Starting off with the items, we have the Battle Compressor. This is going to allow us to discard those executes, as well as the one-off supporter cards that we play in order to reuse them with things like Versus Seeker. Then we of course have our A-Spec, which is computer search in this case, as it's another way of searching out any card from our deck. We can get the exact card that we need at any given time. We do have to discard 2 cards, but like I said, with Propagation, that's going to mean that we can use it for free essentially. Then we have a couple of Field Blower if we need to get rid of my opponent's tools or even stadiums. Then we have 4 Nest Ball, as well as, oh, it's not there, but we have the Ultra Ball here as well. This is great because we need to get our basics out, as well as being able to get out any Pokemon early on is crucial. And then of course we have our special charges. This is just mainly for those decks that are really disruptive and discard our energies. Since we only play 4 copies of double colourless energy here, it does cover the full attack cost, and we can even use it to attack with things like Tapu Lele or the Flapple if it really comes down to it. But we have 4 copies of these, so a high count of special charge is really nice in this deck. Then we also have our 4 Versus Seeker to get back any support card that we want, which is very versatile, and it is good throughout most points of the game, but once you have used 4 of these, we'll see that we have other ways of getting our supporters back. And speaking of supporters, we'll get into those just in a minute, but we also have our Turffield Stadium here, which is the stadium of choice as it lets us search for a grass type evolution, and it's just another way of getting our Flapple set up so we can get that extra spreading damage on. And then the last of the items is the Muscle Band here, 2 of these, as it boosts our damage and allows us to deal 140, which is actually a very key number as it means that you can 2-hit ADP and many of the other tag team Pokemon that have the higher amount of HP, like 260, 270, 280, that kind of thing. It means you can get knockouts much easier. Now going through the supporter cards, I do want to highlight all of these cards for the most part, as it is very specific choices that we've made here. So we have our standard things like our N and our Professor's Research, of course, in order to discard our hand, draw 7, but we have some very niche supporters as well. So we have one Lysander and one Guzma, just in case we get stuck. Then we have the option of either one, but we also have copies of Lusamine. Since Lusamine recently got unbanned in the expanded format, we can once again use Lusamine in order to get back a Stadium card, or we can get back supporter cards with this as well. Any combination that we want. This is great because if my opponent is playing lots of Chaotic Swell, we can easily get back our Stadium in order to reuse it, as well as infinitely looping our supporters because we can get back a Lusamine as well as another supporter that we can then use on the following turn. So great way to infinitely loop our supporters here, and it's a great choice in a Togekiss vmax deck, especially a lot of the controlling archetypes that try and disrupt your opponent. Typically play that kind of supporter, but we've made good use of it here as we can go for a similar approach. As we do have things like Acerola, this is going to allow us to completely heal our VMAX after taking a big hit or a couple of hits, and then go into a fresh VMAX and deny my opponent prizes, so a great way to stall out while we get enough damage on the board. And then we also have a Faba. This is great for removing special energies, and you can always reuse this to get rid of those pesky special energies, or even stadium cards and things of that nature. We of course have a Plumeria for the same kind of thing, where we can remove energies from my opponent, as you can remove basic energies with this, and in combination with Execute, being able to use this for free is some great control and disruption options while you get the damage on the board that you need. And finally, for our supporters, we do have Roxy here. This is the main draw engine for the deck, as we can use it for free with our Executes, ditching those two Executes, drawing 6 cards, and then doing the exact same thing on the following turn to really maximize our draw potential and see a lot of cards throughout the course of our deck. And we're not worried whatsoever about decking out, because the Flapple does shuffle itself back into the deck, so for the most part, as long as you're not up against an opposing deck which is trying to deck you out, then you should never deck out with this deck, as you can always put Flapple back into your deck and have a couple of cards in there. This is a super fun deck to play. I really enjoy playing it. It is a little bit of a low damage deck at times, but with the amount of control options that you have and just being able to place damage counters around your opponent's board with the Flapple, it is super enjoyable, so I'd highly recommend it. And if you enjoy the video and seeing these matches, be sure to give the video a like as well, as it really helps me out. But let's get into a couple of matches here, see how we get on, and see if we can get some wins with Togekiss and Flapple. We're starting off our first match here with a mulligan, which you hate to see, but my opponent does have a bunch of Pokemon coming into play here. Hopefully we start off with a Togekiss, that would be ideal. Well, looks like it's going to be an Applin instead, but at least we have the Battle Compressor as well as a Nest Ball to start us off and get our deck going here, so we should be running pretty smoothly. And it looks like we're up against some sort of a lightning based deck from the looks of things. So I'm definitely going to start off with the Nest Ball. It's going to be a very difficult matchup since we are actually weak to lightning, and we don't play any weakness card energy or weakness policy, because you just typically don't come into these decks all that often. So we'll start off with Battle Compressor and get rid of our Executes, and we'll also get rid of a supporter card that we don't need right now. Probably just the Roxy, since it is a main way of drawing cards. Makes sense to get rid of it. And we can just hold the rest of this hand, I think, and wait for my opponent and seeing what they do. Don't really have any pressure to use a computer search right now, since there's not really anything else that we need. My opponent's playing down the Pikarom in order to attach to it, and they're most likely going to try and full blitz this, probably on this first turn of the game, well, for them anyway, since they have things like Max Elixir, but no, it just looks like they're going to be passing over to us, which is exactly what I want. We do actually top deck the Roxy, which is very nice. So we'll go ahead and use our Executes and make use of those first of all. Getting those back into the hand is the main goal of our turns here, so that we can discard them with things like Roxy. So here we go. Let's see what 6 cards we draw into. Hopefully it's some good ones. We get an Energy. We also get another Togekiss here, as well as the Ultra Ball. So some good options for sure. Let's go ahead and attach the energy first of all, and we can also use our Executes to make use of the Ultra Ball in order to get the VMAX out here. It's going to be very useful for us. So we'll go with this Ultra Ball, get rid of our eggs, and splat those back into the discard pile, grabbing us the VMAX here. The main attacker after all. We can also use a Nest Ball to get some more Pokemon into play, probably just another Applin since we have another Togekiss available right here. And now we are going to computer search in order to get our stadium into play and start getting out some of our grass evolutions. Well, not grass evolutions, but Flapples is what I mean. Definitely did not forget the name of them there, but here we go, computer search for the Turffield Stadium. It's probably going to be all the way at the end here. Yep, here we go. We have actually prized one of them, which is a bit unfortunate, but at least we do have the Lucamine. That's the whole point of it being in the deck, so that we can recover our Turffield Stadiums infinitely. That is the whole point. So here we go, we get our Flapple, and we can start dealing some damage. Let's put it onto the Zeraora over there, since the Pikarom can get 2 hit by our VMAX, so it makes most sense to put it onto the Flapple damage onto the Zeraora. Anyway, definitely know what I'm talking about. And here we go, we can use our Max Glide to get the knockout on the Tapu Koko here. And yes, of course, we want to search our deck for 2 cards. So let's get ourselves the Applin, and we'll have a look here. Possibly use the Battle Compressor, seems like a good option. And there's not really anything else that we need here, so I kind of like the Battle Compressor to get a couple more supporter cards into the discard pile that we might need later on. So taking these 2 makes the most sense for me right now. And we do get a prize card as well to supplement our hand. Getting the Lucamine out there is ideal, as we can then get any supporter card back that we need, as well as our stadium. And we did need both of our Lucamine in order to loot them after all. My opponent is going to be putting down another Pokemon here, the Morpeko, so perhaps they're playing the VMAX. They do have the Flying Flip Tapu Koko there, so we'll have to see what other Pokemon that they're going for, but they're playing very slowly. It kind of tells me that they have a bit of a dead hand, that they can't really do anything with whatsoever, which is excellent. We're going to be playing down an Applin and making use of our Battle Compressor, like I said, getting rid of some cards that we don't really need here, like the Plumeria, and we can also get rid of a Professor's Research since we don't need that, and the Lysander. All of these cards are fine to discard as we can get them back, and we don't really want to be using our Professor's Research when we have things like Roxy and also our attack, just expanding our hand and getting the cards exactly as we want them. We get another Flapple into play here, and I think I will actually go for the Roxy play. Our other option is actually using the Guzma and bringing up the Tapu Koko here that we can get a knockout on. I kind of like that so that it stops my opponent from getting the use out of the Tapu Koko. So let's go with that. We'll put the Flapple into the active spot, as we can actually move it very easily by putting it back into the deck and getting the effect of the damage here. And then we put our VMAX back into the play, and using the Max Glide, we have enough damage in order to get a knockout. Of course, we're going to search our deck again and get the Applins into play. There's not really any other cards that we need right now, as we have a lot of good options in our hand, so we'll just take the 2 Applins. If my opponent does get a hit into our VMAX, we have the Acerola to pick it up, and that's going to completely stop my opponent from getting a knockout here. So yeah, we should be in a pretty reasonable spot, and we can start dealing damage onto these big tag team Pokemon and the GX and V Pokemon. They're choosing to attach onto the active Morpeko, which is definitely a reasonable option since it is going to put us in range of getting a 1-hit knockout to a Pikarom. So that is a little scary, but we should be able to deal with it as we do have our Acerola. So I will actually use Acerola now to pick up our VMAX just to prevent the damage, and we do have another one in our hand anyway, so we should be fine here. And of course we can evolve our VMAX since we did have the Togekiss already on the bench, and we also get to search out a Flapple using our Turffield Stadium, putting it onto our Applin that took damage, of course, so that we can protect it and it doesn't get knocked out. Nothing else in our hand to play out, so Let's do our damage, and there we go, my opponent concedes. Their hand is completely dead, and we're going to overwhelm them with damage, so even being weak to lightning, we're able to beat a lightning deck. Let's get into another game here. Getting into our second game here, we're up against a interesting deck. They have the Fire Sleeves, so not quite sure what they're playing. They'd get a mulligan, but we'll have to see. Didn't tell us too much. We do have the nest ball for the Togekiss, which is great, as well as another nest ball that we can use to get a second Applin into play. It's going to be very good for us. And we can also put down the double colourless. I don't mind this too much, just in case my opponent uses something like an N or a Marnie. Then we have the energy down at the very least, and now we can just pass over to them. I'm guessing they're probably just going to be using the Beat Catch in order to search the deck. And it is indeed a Charizard deck, but very interesting, they're actually using ADP in their Charizard deck, so they're looking to take extra prize cards as well as deal extra damage before using their Charizards there. So I guess that kind of makes sense, but at the same time that's a lot of combo that they have to pull off here. They even have the interesting, they're using the Machino and Cincino line, so yeah, it's a very interesting deck that they got here, very much like ourselves, but we should be in a pretty good spot as we can easily get knockouts on things like Charizards and ADP. Even with my opponent using the Cramorant, we should be able to easily take knockouts on there. My opponent using the Quit Ball in order to most likely get down another Charmander here. They did also play down the Mew, but if you're familiar with Mew, it doesn't work with abilities. It only counters the attacks, and it's only damage as well that it stops. So we're totally fine to still use our Flapples to get extra damage into play. And that's exactly what we've got for this coming turn, since we have everything that we need here. We've got the VMAX, we've got the Turf Field, but unfortunately we don't have a supporter card. That would be great. But we can at least hold on to the Faba, so if my opponent uses a double dragon energy here, then we can get rid of it. Well, I say here, I mean the following turn, but yeah, here's the Beat Catch, and we draw into a Ultra Ball, which isn't great, not really something that we can make use of. So we'll just go for the Turf Field and get ourselves a Flapple onto the active, and we can certainly do that to get 20 damage into play. Most likely going to be putting onto a Charmander, I think, seems reasonable. Although the ADP is tempting as well, since we will have to hit into it multiple times with our Togekiss. So I think we'll actually start putting in the damage onto the ADP so that we can get an easier knockout. Then we'll be promoting our VMAX. Not really any need to play out our Faba, since we can only get rid of our own stadium. We'll just go for a Max Glide for 120 damage. And of course we do want to search our deck. I think getting the Battle Compressor is going to be good here, so we can get our Execute as well as a couple supporters in the bin. And we could also get something like a Versus Seeker, which could also be good, so we have a choice of supporter cards. The other option is getting a supporter itself, but I kind of like getting the Versus Seeker, so we have some versatility and some options here to choose from. So some good decisions and good options to be had with Max Glide. I do very much like the versatility that it brings, being able to search for any two cards out of your deck. Now here is indeed the double dragon energy coming down from my opponent. They're going to be pulling off the GX attack most likely. We can have a look at the Cramorant here. It does have a 1 retreat cost, so they can just retreat into the ADP and use the Altered Creation GX attack. That's going to get them the additional damage and extra ability to take prize cards as well. But we can Faba it off so that they don't make use of the Ultimate Ray attack on ADP and don't get extra energy into play that way. But they are also able to draw through a lot of their deck very quickly through the combination of Battle Sense as well as Cincino here, ditching a card and drawing 2 with that Make Do ability. We see them also discarding a Dedenne GX here through Giant Hearth to get some extra energy into their hand. Bit unfortunate that we are losing our Turf Field, so we will have to make use of our Lucamine at some point here, most likely, to get that back and ensure we can get some extra Flapples into play. My opponent is going to be indeed retreating and making use of altered creation, so we can just go with our battle compressor. We are going to be discarding our execute, but unfortunately that we have prized one, as you do really need both of those to be extremely effective at going through your items and trainer cards here. Then we'll get rid of a Acerola as well as a N. Could be good here to discard. Don't really see any other valid options. We don't want to discard these special charges, as we kind of need those in case we get knocked out, so want to hold on to those, and the N seems reasonable as well as the Acerola, so we'll discard these. And let's see, we could go for the Flapple play like I mentioned. I think it's going to be our best option in order to slow down my opponent, so we'll go with this, discarding the double dragon so they can't use the ultimate ray. And then we could also use a execute here. Let's go with this. We'll put the execute back into our hand with propagation and use it along with the special charge to discard for the ultra ball in order to get some extra stuff into play here. I think we'll get the second Togekiss out. Then we can also use our max glide and deal 120 damage onto the ADP, as well as search our deck for 2 cards. I think we'll go with a, could potentially get a Acerola mood to just discard one, so we don't really need another one. Let's go with a Applin and probably a Turf Field, to be honest, so we can get a more Flapple out. Let's go with that. Like I said, we have the Acerola, so if my opponent wants to hit into this, they're going to need all 4 of their Leon in the discard pile in order to get a knockout on our Togekiss, as well as finding the energy. They will have to, get the energy, but I mean they do already have energy on Charizard, so yeah, they do need all of their Leon in the discard pile. They have 3 in there, so it's going to be very easy for them to actually get a knockout if they can just discard one more Leon from their hand or deck. Let's see here, they are discarding the Professor Juniper, which is not something that's a Leon. That is a different supporter, so we're in the clear so far. And if my opponent doesn't have it, then they're not going to be able to get a knockout, and we can make use of Acerola to survive a little bit longer for the very least. Perhaps they prized the 4th Leon, that would certainly be ideal for us. Let's see what they discard off of the Battle Sense. It is not Leon, we can check here. It's a a Fire Crystal, not a Battle Crystal, as well as a Charmeleon going into the discard pile. So they're looking to get a rare candy into the second Charizard and get another one set up that way. Let's see if they're able to pull off a switch, or if we can get another free hit into the ADP. They're going for a Welder, so it's not a Leon either. That would be another option for them if they had actually just played the Leon, but they did need a switching card in order to get the ADP out of here. They're going to be attaching onto the ADP though, and also manually attaching the double dragon energy so they can get the ultimate ray off regardless. And that's going to put 180 damage onto us, as well as get more energy into play for them. Now we can make use of our Acerola here, and that could protect us, make it so that my opponent is going to need the 4th Leon still. And that seems like the best option here overall, so let's go with that. Going to Versus Seeker for the Acerola and pick up our VMAX. Don't really need the second energy that we drew into there, but it's all good. We can put our other Togekiss into play as well that we just picked up. So let's get all of our VMAX back into play, as well as our energy, putting the Turf Field down so that we can grab ourselves a Flapple, and that's going to get us additional damage in order to deal enough here in order to get a knockout on this ADP, since the attack will put them up to 260, and this extra bit of damage is going to get them up to 280 to get a knockout. So exactly what we need with the Max Glide here, finishing them off. And we also get to search our deck for 2 cards, so most likely could get another Acerola, kind of like it, and we could also get a Versus Seeker to give us some options. I kind of like that option as well, to be honest. The other option of course is just getting a a vmax, of course, but we'll go with this and see what my opponent has as a return. We'll take 3 prize cards as well. We get the N, which is very nice, having the draw option there. A nest ball is excellent for getting more basics, and there is our second execute. So do wish we had a Roxy in the discard pile now, as that withdraws a lot of cards, but my opponent is promoting the Charizard, so let's see if they have the Leon in their hand. There it is, the 4th Leon coming down. They aren't able to get the knockout now, dealing that base 300 damage with their attack. If you're not familiar, of course, I have covered it quite a bit, but you do additional damage for Leons in your discard pile, so if all 4 are in there, they deal a base of 300. Then with the Leon that they just played, that's 330, and the additional damage from the Altered Creation GX attack brings it up to 360 damage for a knockout on our VMAX, and they are also taking an additional prize card on our VMAX, taking them to 2 prize cards remaining, since they are taking 4 prizes on our VMAX here. They also get the rare candy, getting the second Charizard into play. So we're really going to be on the back foot here, since there's no way that we can actually win the game. Even if we get a knockout on this Charizard, they have another Charizard, but there's no way that we can get a knockout on the active Charizard, since we're only dealing 120 at a time. We would need a bunch of extra Flapple that we just don't have available to us at the moment, which is very, very unfortunate. We can at least get another Applin down. We'll play this hand out, I suppose. There's nothing else that we can do. We can go for the double colorless. We'll get our Flapple into play and see what we can make happen there. Yeah, even with a knockout on the Cramorant, I mean, we could go with the Lysander or Guzma and bring up that, but yeah, it's not going to work out for us either, because that only gives us 2 prize cards, and we do have to take 3, unfortunately. So we'll go with the propagation here, putting the execute back into our hand and discarding both of them with Roxy to see what we draw into, hoping for a VMAX just to get another max glide off and to play the game out and show you how it works here. We have the field blower, but it's not going to be relevant at all, and yeah, there's nothing else that's relevant here. Let's go for a Flapple, putting the damage onto the active Charizard. And I mean, we could go for another Applin, but there's not really any use. Just dealing the 120, even with a muscle band here, we would have been 10 damage short, unfortunately. So all we can do is search out 2 cards, but my opponent does have the game here, since we only have 310 HP, and they are dealing 330 to get the knockout. So let's see how much my opponent chooses to BM us here. I'm guessing it's going to be quite a lot, and they're going to play out their entire hand for absolutely no reason. Let's see, they are playing the Lava Ball, attaching energy. They're probably going to draw a bunch of cards as well for some reason. They have the Leon, so yep, very much BMing us for max damage. 360 going on to our VMAX and taking the remaining prize cards that they need in order to win. So bit of a shame that we couldn't keep up. If we had got enough Flapple to play, we definitely could have won that, but just the way that it goes sometimes. And let's get into the last game. Getting into our final game here, we do have a reasonable opening. The only downside is having Roxy as our supporter. Definitely would prefer something like a Professor's Research here, but at least we have the double nest ball, so we can grab 2 Togekiss, and we did start off with a lot of Pokemon as well, mainly the Applins. So we'll go ahead and attach an energy as well, since we might get hit with like an N or a Marnie, in which case that would be great since our hand is pretty bad, but if that does happen, I want to have an energy in play for that situation. So let's see here, my opponent is playing a Netball. I'm just going to grab them a Grass Energy or a Grass Pokemon, and they have the Rowlet coming down here. They also have the Delmise V in the active, so going to be an interesting matchup, I reckon. And my opponent is playing a Bird Keeper, which actually goes in combos with this Rowlet, allowing them to deal 60 damage to one of my Pokemon for free, which is very good for them, as they can actually take a turn 1 knockout on one of our Applins, which is not appreciated at all. But if we can get into our VMAX, that would be ideal. We did draw into a Nest Ball, which is not great. We're only able to deal a small amount, 20 damage, with our attack here, because it has to be an evolution Pokemon if we want to deal additional damage. So I'm almost just tempted to use Roxy in order to draw cards, which doing extra damage with Flapple would be great, but considering our hand is completely dead, we're going to be forced into using Roxy to draw 3, hoping that we get into something good, but doesn't look like that's going to be the case. It's just going to be an even worse hand, so we're going to have to pass over to my opponent. Hopefully they don't have the same combo of like a Bird Keeper and a Switch, because that would not be very nice. That would take out another Applin on our side. Looks like they have the Evolution Incense, so this could either grab the VMAX or it could grab a Decidueye. Either one is an interesting decision. They are grabbing the Dartrix, the stage 1, going on to the Rowlet, so not quite a Decidueye, but they are most likely going to be looking to get the Decidueye into play so that they can stall, or they could be using the old Decidueye, which is able to place damage counters in the expanded format from the Sun and Moon era, the base set one, but instead they are going for the Alolan Exeggutor and Rowlet GX tag team, and they're going to be evolving straight up, and it is indeed the recent Decidueye here, but the Deep Forest Camel, in order to stop our Vs and Gmaxes from attacking. Our hand is pretty much dead, as I've mentioned. We don't really have much going on, so I'm going to have to Ultra Ball, discard both of these supporters, and go and grab ourselves a Tapu Lele so that we can actually get a useful supporter in this situation. Don't have to do this all that often, but sometimes you'll just get completely useless openings, and as you can see, that's exactly what we've had. So we'll get ourselves the Professor's Research so that we get a nice hand going. Hopefully we just get the VMAX as well as a Flapple. That would be ideal. Looks like it's not going to be the case, so we just get the VMAX, and we can easily just retreat the Applin, which is fine, no big deal. And we can always get back the double colorless energy, but we'll start swinging into the tag team here, dealing 120 and also searching our deck, so we can grab the Battle Compressor as well as the Turffield Stadium. Battle Compressor is going to allow us to get rid of the 2 Executes from our deck, along with a supporter card as well that we might need to make use of. And then of course the Turffield, it will be helping out our opponent, but overall it's going to be needed in order to search out our Flapple here. My opponent doesn't really have anything that they can make use of. They are just able to heal though, which is nice for them. And we, like I said, discarding the Executes, and we can also get rid of perhaps a Faba. Could be a good Pokemon, a good supporter to get rid of. I think that's going to be reasonable. There's not really anything else. I mean, we could get rid of the Lusamine and then Versus Seeker it back, but I kind of like just keeping it in the deck for now, so we'll do that. We have the Turffield to search out our Flapples, like I said, and get those evolved, and of course get our Executes propagated back into the hand so that we can use Roxy here to draw a nice amount of cards overall. Let's see, hopefully we get into a couple of extra Flapple. We will be putting the damage onto the Decidueye, of course, so that we can start hopefully working towards a knockout, but it will take a couple of turns before we can get there. We do indeed get into all of our Flapple, which is very nice. We also get a Battle Compressor, which I am actually going to be playing out here, so that we can get rid of a couple of extra cards like the N, and that's probably the only other one that we need to get rid of, probably a VMAX as well, since we don't need all 3, we only really need 2. And here we go, we can start using our Flapples here, putting 20 onto the Decidueye. It goes back into the deck, and then we can immediately use the Nest Ball in order to search it back out, and we can start using the rest of our Flapples as well here. Also making use of the Ultra Ball so that we can get our Applins back into play and do this all over again on the following turn. And this is exactly how we want the deck to be running. It is a shame that we lost our Applin and Flapple early on there to the early Rowlet, but at least we do have 3 that we can work with, and that should be plenty to deal with this Decidueye. So here we go, we can Ultra Ball, discarding these 2 Executes and getting our Applin back into the bench. here we go, nothing else to play out, so we can use our max glide, deal that 120 damage once again, and absolutely search our deck. Getting the Applin, and probably just a Flapple as well, since we can only search one of them with the Turf Field. So let's grab that, and there's not really any other cards that we want to be grabbing here. We do have the Lucamine in our hands, so that's a very good thing to have. The only other card that I'm looking for here is the Muscle Band, and mainly just ways to get out more Flapple to deal with these Decidueye, but assuming my opponent doesn't heal, we should be able to get a knockout on the active. That's going to be putting us in a very good position overall here. So let's see what my opponent has for us, how much energy they can get into play. I'm not sure if they're going to be playing any other stage 2 Pokemon like the Rillaboom, which does accelerate grass energy. That is something that you do see quite often with the expanded grass decks, but it looks like they are going to be attaching onto the Decidueye, so hoping to get some damage out of it. We also see a Pharmosa and Buzzwole GX tag team, using the Turf Field as well on their side to get a grass type evolution. And we just see the pass from our opponent, which is great news from us. Not another turn of no attack from my opponent is absolutely what we want here. We do get down our double Flapple, we also get our Turf Field to search out the third one. Not able to put it into play just yet, but that's fine because we have it in our hand and available. Now let's have a look at the discard pile. We can have a look and see what cards we might want to get out of there with our Lucamine, as we might want to start doing our lip here. I think something like the Guzma as well as the Acerola would be a very nice couple of cards to make sure that we always have available. So I'm going to go ahead and grab those two, as we can definitely make use of those. And we can start doing our whole combo of getting extra damage into play. And we'll get an additional 40 damage this turn, which is reasonable enough. We did get 60 last turn, and we are a little bit closer to getting a knockout on that Decidueye. Not able to get as many Flapple into play this turn, but there we go, we get a concede from my opponent. Haven't had the best games this video in terms of showing off the deck, but we at least got to show off exactly how it works in terms of searching out your Flapples every single turn, as well as dealing the upfront 120 damage with the Togekiss vmax. So it's a very effective and fun deck to play overall. I would highly recommend that you give it a try, and I'll see you in the next video.